My next guest on the program here in the studio, Labor Senator Murray Watt and Liberal MP Andrew Wallace. Thanks both for your time today.
Thanks, Tom.
How are you, Tom?
All supposed today to be about recognising communities that have struggled because of bushfires, people dying, a lot of properties destroyed as well. And the Nationals have had a spill of leadership. It must be pretty disappointing.
Well, look, the spill of leadership essentially arises out of the issue with Bridget McKenzie resigning over the weekend. So, you know, it's I'm not here to cast judgment on my National Party colleagues, but it flows from that situation.
Well, the main leadership spill didn't have to, though. There was just one position to replace.
No, but look, I mean, you know, as I said, I'm not here to cast judgment on my National Party colleagues. Barnaby threw his hat in the ring, brought on by a spill from Lou O'Brien, but you know, that's a matter for the National Party to determine. And it has, very clearly. You wouldn't even say to all the people out there that are starting to rebuild and looking at Parliament that it's a disappointing occasion for that to happen? Well, Tom, the reality is that you know, the government is absolutely focused on the Australian people. It's absolutely focused on rebuilding after the fires. The issue of the Bridget McKenzie's resignation has triggered a ballot in relation to the deputy position, and Barnaby, you know, he called it was Lou O'Brien that called a spill, but the reality is that Michael McCormack remains the Deputy Prime Minister and will no doubt serve the Cabinet and David Littleproud is now the Deputy of the National Party, and I'm sure that that David Littleproud and Michael McCormack will continue to serve the National Party's interests well.
Just got a statement in from Barnaby Joyce. I would like to congratulate Michael McCormack in winning the leadership ballot and by doing so re-endorsement of his position as leader of the Nationals Party. It is appropriate that if an issue needs resolving as to contentions held, there is a procedure to resolve it as noted in our parliamentary system. That process has been followed and the issue is finalised. This was made as brief as possible prior to the first sitting of Parliament for the year. I support the vote of the room and will strive for the re-election of a Morrison-McCormack government, as this is definitely the better outcome for Australia and especially Aboriginal people. Now my first attentions go back to where they were before this week, the New England drought, fires and now the threat of coronavirus. Murray, what your thoughts on all of this?
Oh, look, I think it's incredibly disappointing that on a day that on a bipartisan basis had been agreed to be set aside to pay tribute to the victims of the bushfires, that the National Party yet again are engaged in a civil war about who can have the top job. You know, regional Australia is hurting in so many ways. We've got drought, we've got towns running out of water, we've got bushfires. There've been bushfires in National Party electorates, and people there expect their representatives to actually focus on the recovery effort. And instead of that, we've just got this ongoing circus with musical chairs being played amongst National Party members about who gets to be the leader. It is incredibly disrespectful of bushfire victims, and it yet again shows that the National Party is just focused on themselves rather than the people they say they represent.
I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that. What about Labor having its own spill on the day of an apology to, I think it was child sex abuse on that particular occasion?
That's well before my time in this Parliament. I sort of can't comment on what the circumstances were.
You can't just draw a line and say anything Labor did last time. It's nothing to do with
well,
part
no,
of the party.
What we're focused on is what's happening in this Parliament today, not what happened last week, last year, 10 years ago.
No, but I'm just pointing out that this continues a sad tradition of leadership spills trumping all else, which Labor also...
I do think, whichever party's involved, I do think that it's disappointing to see parties preoccupied with their own internal affairs on significant days, such as today, when we're supposed to be focused on bushfire recovery. Now, Andrew is doing a good job of defending his coalition partners about what they're up to, but if anyone believes that this government is focused on bushfire recovery, they're kidding themselves. A significant chunk of this government is focused on who gets to be the top dog, who gets to ride in the special com car, rather than thinking about, you know, rural Australians. And seriously, if anyone thinks that this is over from Barnaby Joyce, then I've got a Harbour Bridge to sell them. I mean, all the reports are that this vote went down to 11-10.
I don't think they're all, that there are some.
Well, there's also 11-6, which suggests that 4 people couldn't bring themselves to vote for anyone. This is not the end of this. It never has been the end of this. Barnaby Joyce will never give up this project to get himself back in the Deputy Prime Minister's chair, and nor will his supporters. And the tragedy is that the longer they keep spending their time fighting over who gets the top job, the more regional Australians get forgotten.
Does Barnaby Joyce need to be true to his statement? He'll strive for the re-election of a Morrison-McCormack government. Nothing more in this term.
Well, look, you can only take someone at face value, Tom. You know, I've had a lot to do with Barnaby, and I take on face value what he said. And look, I will agree with one thing that Murray has said, and I think that this is universal. It doesn't matter what party you belong to, and that is, you know, if you're quibbling amongst yourselves, if you're concentrating on yourselves, if you're talking about yourselves, you're not talking about the Australian people, and that's one thing the Australian people will not cop, and rightly so. The reality is this issue has been dealt with very, very swiftly. The Deputy Prime Minister remains Michael McCormack. David Littleproud will serve him very, very well as his deputy, and the National Party. And also, let's not forget, there are many Liberal Party members that service regional Australia as well. Now, regional Australia has been through some very, very difficult times over the summer. They are a resilient bunch. Our country Australians and our regional Australians are a resilient bunch. They will recover. They will need some help. We will give them that help wherever we can, but they will recover, and we will get back to the strength that we know we are in country Australia.
Just following on Barnaby Joyce, though, again to that question. Here's his statement. Can't mistake what he's saying here. Does he need to keep that word now?
Well, you should hold him to that word. It's not a matter for me. Ultimately, he has come out and said that he will work tirelessly towards the re-election of a Morrison and McCormack government, and I've no doubt that the members of the media and his colleagues will hold him to that.
He'll certainly be asked.
I mean, it's a continuation of the chaos we've seen within this government from day one. We've had, you know, the Abbott Trust government, then the Turnbull Trust government, then we've got the Turnbull Joyce government, then this government, that government. They cannot focus on the Australian people. They are all about themselves and all about their division.
People who live in glass houses.
And we paid the price of our divisions by being voted out of office, and we're here 8 months after an election, and we're back into it again, Groundhog Day.
We've done probably enough history for today. Let's talk though about one other aspect of this. Matthew Canavan. Now, when he came out and resigned yesterday, he said he also had to make the Prime Minister aware that so he's in charge of the Northern Australian Infrastructure Fund. A $20 million loan was given out to help the North Queensland Cowboys build a stadium, and he was making people aware of that conflict, saying he didn't believe anything untoward had happened. He didn't make a decision on it, so different to Bridget McKenzie, no decision made. It was just given off to him as to whether he'd object or not. Is there an issue here?
I think there's a very big issue here, and I think the circumstances are exactly the same as what forced Bridget McKenzie to resign her ministry. I think the timing of this is quite interesting, that Matt Canavan finally decides to reveal to the public that he's possibly got a conflict of interest involving a grant under his own portfolio on the day that there's a leadership spill where he has another reason to resign from the ministry. But, you know, Matt Canavan is going out of his way to say, oh, look, this is different. I wasn't involved in approving this. I'm sorry, but here's the press release that Matt Canavan issued on the 3rd of December last year. Canavan approves $20 million for the Cowboys Multi-Use Training Centre. It was good enough for him to claim credit for it in approving it when he got to do a press release, but now that things are a little bit murky, it's like, oh, nothing to do with me. Well, that's just rubbish.
What do you make of that? Should this go off to Prime Minister and Cabinet as well?
Well, I mean, ultimately the issue is from a legal perspective and from a ministerial responsibility perspective, it's a bit of a moot point. But, I mean, Matt has said that he didn't make any decisions in relation to that.
He just approved it, according to his press release.
Well, he's come out just today or yesterday and said that he didn't make any decisions on that point. I take it on face value. Now, ultimately, the ministerial standard of conduct requires ministers to declare their interests, as it does for, in fact, any member of Parliament or Senator.
He said he wasn't aware of the membership, so is ignorance a defence?
Look, I think that all members of Parliament and senators, there's an obligation on all of us to declare any organisations to which we belong, whether it be the local surf club, of which I'm a member, or a footy club. So, you know, there is an obligation on us to notify that register.
Right. So is ignorance a defence?
Well, if you want to speak legally, ignorance is no defence from a legal perspective, but you know, there's an obligation on all of us to be aware of what organisations that we belong to and where there could be a potential conflict.
All right.
Just quickly on that, this needs to be investigated in the same way Bridget McKenzie's conflict was investigated. And if Bridget McKenzie having a conflict was a reason she can't come back to Cabinet, then nor should Matt Canavan.
Just finally, revelations of money tipped into campaigns. Clive Palmer, $84 million. Are you comfortable with that?
Wasn't exactly money well spent, was it?
I think Clive got exactly what he was after with his $84 million.
Look, at the end of the day, Clive Palmer was looking to win seats in the House of Representatives,
or maybe influence,
and the Senate. Now, he was spectacularly rejected by the Australian people, but there's a very, very big difference here, because the money that was spent by Clive Palmer was greatly distinguishable from the money that was spent by the unions, and the unions funneling money into, of course, the Labor Party. Now, the unions don't necessarily want, well, openly anyway, don't want members in the Parliament or the Senate, but they want to control the Labor members, and ultimately the millions of dollars that was channelled in by the ACTU and various unions like the CFMEU want to buy influence by donating money to the Labor Party. So, but they're very, very different
looking at
things.
controls of Clive Palmer, would you need to look at all entities, including unions?
Well, I think there are already strict regulations in place about donations from companies, from unions, from individuals. But I think there is something obscene that an individual can make an $84 million,
doing something about it?
An $84 million donation from one individual.
Well, it wasn't an individual, Murray. They were from
through his company to influence the result of an election. Everyone who paid any attention to that election knew that it wasn't about Clive Palmer winning seats for himself. He had one objective, which was to get the Morrison government back, and he succeeded.
We are out of time. Murray Watt, Andrew Wallace, thanks for your time today.